The next question comes from Laura B, 2572. What books would you recommend for Afghanistan, and what books would you recommend to understand some conflicts? I love the recommendation to understand the invasion of Ukraine. Thank you very much, Laura. I had this Ukraine list that I did shortly after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia last year. Afghanistan is, I think there's one book that I would definitely recommend you to read about Afghanistan, and this I would also recommend the author. The author is the Norwegian journalist and writer Åsne Seierstad. Åsne Seierstad is an amazing person and writer. She is really, I love her. And what she does in books, in terms of books, she only writes nonfiction, but she wrote such great things. She wrote one book that I recommend. It's called One of Us. This has nothing to do with Afghanistan, but One of Us is about the mass shooter Anders Behring Breivik, who killed 65 very young people on Utøya in Norway, in Oslo, in 2013, I think, or was it 12? So this is a great book because she describes this guy, this man, as one who came from the middle of Norwegian society and became a murderer. But this Åsne Seierstad has also traveled in many countries in the world, and she has done this beautiful book, I think, very early in her career, already in 2004 or 5. There's a book called The Bookseller of Kabul. And Åsne has visited a bookseller in Kabul in the beginning, shortly after the Taliban were driven away from power in the war. So, and she visited this bookseller and lived with him and his family for about 4 months and wrote this book about him and about his family. And she shows this man who is a very sort of rebellious man. He's fighting for books. He has hidden books from the communists, but also from the Taliban. He always tried to beware the books. His books sometimes they were burned. He was punished, but he always was hiding a lot of books, put them in different places in Kabul in order to preserve them for people to read. But this guy who was rebellious against the communists and against the Taliban is also a very conservative man concerning his family and his wives. He has 2 wives and his daughters. So Seierstad is describing this bookseller where you have the bookish theme, which we like, but she also describes Afghanistan and this person sort of representing Afghan society. That's a very beautiful book. And then concerning the conflict around Afghanistan that has risen after 2001, after 9/11, I think the best book is Jason Burke's The 9/11 Wars, which describe the time shortly before and also after 9/11 in a very, very great way. Otherwise, I don't know so much about good books that sort of depict the conflict and the history of Afghanistan. I think these 2 are really good books. More books about some conflicts. Please let me return with that answer, because I can make a whole video about that. So I would return to that question in the future. That's a good idea for making a video, actually. The next question comes from Brian in Texas, and Bookish Texan, as his channel now is called. He writes, you work as sport journalist, I believe. What is the favorite sports event you have covered and why? Yes, I do work as a sports journalist, sports writer sometimes, but I don't get any money from it. It's just a kind of hobby. When I was young, some 100 years ago, I wanted to be a sports journalist. That's true. I was so much engaged in football, what you call soccer, but I never became a sports journalist because, well, life didn't want me to be a sports journalist, probably. And today I'm actually thankful that it never become true. But I found to women's soccer in 2005 because of my job. Because my job is I work for the German Cultural Institute here in Stockholm. We have branches in a lot of countries in the world. And I work with German language, try to promote the German language, try to bring students to learn or to sort of engage with Germany and German questions, do exams. I can test you in German in all the levels of the European, all the European levels that are existing from A1 to C2. But sports journalism or writing about women's football is a hobby that I have. And I have written a lot. Thousands of posts on a blog for a Swedish website. First I was writing in German, then I have written a few articles in English for an American magazine, online magazine called Our Game Magazine, and I did hundreds of interviews with players. But so your question about the favorite sports event, which would be women's football, because that's the only thing that I'm sort of covering, is not so easy, because I traveled to the European Championships in 2009 to Finland. 2013 it was here in Sweden. 2017 it was in the Netherlands. These were great events, of course. In Sweden, I remember very well the final of the Euros in 2013. It was here in Stockholm, actually in the city of Solna, in Friends Arena. Germany was meeting Norway. And it was a funny final. Germany won by 1-0, and the goal was scored by Anja Mittag, a woman that I have interviewed a couple of times. But I was, although I'm German, I was sort of supporting the Norwegian team, and the reason was that I had met the Norwegians several times in this tournament, from the very beginning in Kalmar in southern Sweden, where they played the group games, and then I followed them to the quarterfinals, to the semifinals, and then to the finals, so every game of them. And I talked to the players a lot, so I was on a friendly basis with the players, and that's why I supported Norway in the final. But Germany won. So 1-0, because, I mean, Norway, come on. If you get 2 penalties in the final of a European Championship game, then you have to convert at least one. But they converted nothing, so Norway lost 1-0. But then the picture of myself, 2013, Stockholm, Solna, Sweden, went around the whole world, because I was in the press box. And I was standing there in the press box, and Michel Platini, at the time UEFA president, now not so well-respected man anymore, Michel Platini was handing over the cup to the Germans, and the Germans were standing there and celebrating, and I was standing like 8 meters, something like that, behind the German team, and press photographers took thousands of photos of the Germans celebrating, and always, on almost every photo that was made and published, you can see me in the background standing there with a very serious face, because I wasn't so happy. But this photo went all around the world. I was in Spiegel in Germany. I was in The Guardian in England. I was on ESPN in the US. I was in Japanese papers. Everywhere was this photo where I stand as a sort of non-smiling man behind the German national team in 2013. It's one of the greatest memories I have. And then, of course, one of the greatest memories I have is interviewing the best player at the time in the whole wide world, the wonderful Brazilian Marta Vieira da Silva from Dios Riachos, I think, in Brazil, in 2012 or something, in Tyresö in Sweden, when she played for Tyresö. And Marta, who was the best player in the world, it was so easy at the time, and they were so accessible. It's incredible. I had her phone number, and I texted her a message one day during a break or so. I texted her a message and I said, Marta, could I meet you over a cup of coffee and do an interview with you? I never expected her to answer right away, but she did. She answered, and she said, yes, what about tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon at this and this cafe in Tyresö? So I went there, and Marta came, and we had a huge cup of coffee, and we talked for about 1 hour and 20 minutes or something, and it was a great interview. I loved it, and it was the only time, actually, when I was sitting there with someone in the open, in the public, and all the time people were coming and saying like, excuse me, are you Marta? My daughter loves you. Could you write an autograph? Oh yes, I can do that. I was like, wow, I'm sitting with a superstar here. And Marta, now she's playing for the Orlando Pride in the US, and she's doing her comeback after an ACL very soon. She's 37 years old now. That was a great time. These two things I would mention. So let's go back to the questions here.